if we could create a movement of fathers whose hearts were turned towards their sons.
Yeah, Malachi 4.
Yeah. Then I think what we end up with is, in a sense, foster families for men. They wouldn't be natural families, but they would be probably stronger than anything these men have ever, these males have ever known, and they could learn to become men from guys who just took responsibility to invest.
Well, welcome to Cultural Catalyst, where we help you learn how to live fully alive, co-labor with God, and change the world. And today, I have Danny Silk with me. I'm your host, Kris Vallotton, by the way. And let's see, you've been friends. I've been friends with you since you were, well, not actually friends,
Acquaintances.
Yeah,
we met when I was 16 and a half years old.
And we worked in a tire store together.
Yeah.
And
now that I'm 20.
You were not exactly walking with Jesus at the time.
No, I fended you off for 5 years.
You fended off 5 years.
Yeah.
Didn't
get saved till I was 21.
Man. But now you are the co-founder of Loving on Purpose.
Yes.
I imagine the other co is your woman.
Yes.
And ministering a lot to families. And I'm really excited to have you on. I just wrote a book called Uprising, about helping to father the most fatherless generation in the history of the world. Mm-hmm. And you know a little bit about fathering. So I'd really like to just talk today about, how do we restore the family? You got, LGBTQ with the deconstruction of the family. You got 51% of all of our fathers now. All families are born without a father, out of wedlock. Let's have a conversation. What are you thinking about that?
I'm thinking that it feels overwhelming, right?
It does.
There's so many broken spots, so you just got to pick a target. And I'm teaming up with the guys that are really locking on to the men. I think we gotta serve the men, heal the men, bond the men to each other. I know that we have a huge fatherlessness fruit, I think, but I think even upstream from that is a brotherlessness breakdown.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
no brotherhood.
Yeah, I think there's just such a disbanding of men being connected, which is easy to do, especially when you go such a long time without an army, or a national crisis with that, because men tend to bond together in crisis, deal with the problem, bond their hearts to other men in that vulnerability and that time spent. So all the World War II, even the Vietnam guys, I mean, the times that we've moved through generations where men have had to serve each other sacrificially, laying their lives down for each other, being so vulnerable, I don't know if I'm going to live through today. And that does something to a guy. That there's something in our covenant heart that starves for that. And outside of that, it's really in a brotherhoodness. So maybe in college, a fraternity, sports teams,
camaraderie.
Wherever you would serve together, where you have really high highs and really low lows and time spent together. That we need to focus on.
It's funny because one of the chapters in my book is called Bonded in Battle. I don't think you've read the book, but Bonded in Battle. And we talk about that very thing that, and I was talking about it with reference to the fact that men actually do need men.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So we talk a lot about, men need women, and men were born sexually to be attracted to women. And we have all this perversion, the wrong version going on. But the other side of the coin is men actually need men. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and it says that they actually had a soul tie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we think of soul ties as being negative, but there's actually positive soul ties. And women need women too. We're a little bit on the subject of men, but women do something for women that men can't do for women, and men do something for men that women can't do for men.
Yeah.
And so there is that. I agree with you. There is a positive effect of war on men in that they bond in battle.
Yeah.
And then they starve for it when they leave the battlefield, really, because they've never had that kind of connect and camaraderie with anyone.
Yeah, it's almost like it's artificial to create that kind of intensity, but that's where men bond.
Yeah,
that's where brothers. Like if you grow up in a family, the
healthy family.
Even a healthy family, you still have these incredible times of vulnerability together.
Yeah,
and that's what bonds natural brothers together, is that I've walked through stuff at the places of vulnerability in my life, and my brother was there for me.
Yeah.
Or maybe he was the cause of that vulnerability, but we worked it out on the other side.
Yeah.
Or maybe dad was a problem, or whatever. We walked through this, and it was all that time spent that leads to this bond. So to this day, my little brother is the quickest connect for me of any human being that I can think of. And I got some good friends. I got some people I've been with for a very long time. But if I get on the phone with my brother, my family knows I'm talking to him because I am laughing so deeply about the dumbest stuff. We are just...
And you grew up in a war zone.
We grew up in a war zone.
Yeah. Raised by wolves. I always say raised by wolves.
Absolutely.
My mama wolf was very kind and loving. My mom was amazing, but I was raised by wolves too.
Yeah.
And add to that the virtual reality world that we live in, and that when we talk about excitement now, we're not talking about the football field, the soccer field, the basketball court, or the baseball field. We're often talking about our guys who played video games together.
Yeah.
Which doesn't create a real emotional connect, and there's really not a deep camaraderie made in a virtual reality world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that really is serving to preserve isolation, I think. There's kind of an imaginary covenant or an imaginary camaraderie in that I know this guy's tag name, but I don't even know what he looks like.
Yeah.
We've never, and what is prevented really is us learning life from each other. We learn video game from each other, but we don't really learn how you do your marriage, how you do your kids, how you do your work, how you do your money. We don't learn any of that from each other, which we normally would if we were just hanging out as guys.
And what do we learn from video games? Which is, I'm not, my grandkids play video games, so I'm not I don't want to nix video games, but when I'm raised by machines, and in a video game, the goal of the conflict is to destroy the person who creates the conflict, usually shoot them, blow them up. It's not surprising that kids live in isolation. 51% of families are fatherless. We're talking about now men not bonding with men, living at home, watching video games, playing video games, solving conflicts by blowing up the other guy, and then wondering why shootings are not just perpetuating, but they're actually accelerating.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I think that it perpetuates is the escape from responsibility. When I zone out for 6 hours, playing this game, go check and see how that's affecting your areas of responsibility, like your marriage. Oh, you didn't get married. Oh, why didn't you get married? Oh, I didn't want that kind of responsibility.
Yeah.
And so I cultivate in my life these loops they're not reality. They're not growing me into who I've been called to be as a protector, a provider, a connector. I'm not growing in any of those things. There's an illusion that I am because I am on level 27 now.
Yeah.
So man, am I really a success or what? No, why don't you take a look at the rest of your life? It's pretty self-centered.
Yeah.
And it's pretty limited to you controlling everything around you.
Yeah, and then your friends are often your followers, your TikTok followers, your Instagram followers, whatever. It's like, it is crazy. So so we kind of described the problem pretty well. Lots of single moms at home raising boys and girls. Mm-hmm. What's the answer? I mean, I guess that's the $20 billion question. Like, what's the answer? Schools are being shot up. 51% of our women are being pregnant with a man who's not a father, who doesn't stay home, doesn't protect the child. Abortion. I mean, we just gay marriage. We get LGBTQ. We get transgenderism. I mean, like, how do we turn it around, dude?
Yeah. Well, I think that men learn to be men from other men. So we're going to have to gather up the responsible men who want to take responsibility and train and teach other men, invest in other men, cultivate covenant. Before I knew what covenant was, I met guys like you and Bill Derryberry and Charlie and Buck and Keith. And Keith was one of the guys learning too. Barry, all these men who assumed a position of responsibility in being a father.
Yeah.
And showing me what that was and reaching out to me and calling me in. We used to call that home group leaders, but I think now it's going to be really just fathers that are intentional about finding men and building brotherhoods, like building clusters of relationships where I spend dedicated time pouring into your life and challenging you and calling you out of isolation and calling you out of being the master of your own universe. And I think that if we could create a movement of fathers whose hearts were turned towards their sons.
Yeah, Malachi 4.
Yeah. Then I think what we end up with is, in a sense, foster families for men. They wouldn't be natural families, but they would be probably stronger than anything these men have ever, these males have ever known, and they could learn to become men from guys who just took responsibility to invest.
It sounds a little bit like David's mighty men in a way.
Yeah.
Because David's got 400 guys who are discontent, in debt, nobody likes them, dropouts, malcontents, and says he becomes the captain of them. And at first it's a military move, which we just talked about, bonding. But at the end of David's life, he's got 33 of those guys that are their family, and they're laying down their life for one another, they're dying for one another. And I do think that I have a lot of deep sense that we are in the Malachi 4 moment in which, the verse says, Elijah the prophet in the last days will send Elijah the prophet. He'll restore the hearts of fathers to sons and daughters, hearts of sons and daughters to fathers. And so we're in this movement. We experienced it, I think, some 30 years ago in the Promise Keepers movement, really. But we need to revisit it with some deeper intention, I think. Mm-hmm. We learned a lot from that.
I'm working on a book, unsettled on the title as of yet, but
what's it about?
It's really about just men becoming brothers.
Yeah.
And it's about supporting one another in what I call the dragons of a man's life. There's these 7 dragons that I've identified, and it's.
Can you remember any of them?
Yeah. It's man and God.
Okay.
It's like, okay, I gotta break through the idea that I am
glass ceiling.
That I am a criminal before a judge. Yeah. And I have to get to I am a son before a father.
That's great.
And that is just the wrestling match of a man's life. And then there's a man in himself. I have got to get past the idea that I am I'm inadequate, that I'm insignificant, that, the paralysis that sets in when a man is losing in the dragon against himself.
Wow.
And then there is the battle of men and women, a man with a woman. Like, he's so afraid of being a failure. He's so afraid of being rejected. He's so afraid of being abandoned. These are the dragons. And so a dragon brings out the best or the worst in you, right?
You beat the dragon.
You beat the dragon, and somehow the dragon grows its head back,
You got to go after
You got to go that sucker again. That's why you need your brothers.
Yeah.
Got it. You got to have your brothers.
Or more than one dragon. You got to have more than one. You got to have brothers.
Yeah, you got to have somebody pushing you back in there and fighting with you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Men and other men. I think this is why men become isolated, is because we don't have that artificial thing that pushes me into being willing to live sacrificially in my relationship with other men.
Yeah.
We kind of transactionally live with other men, but not necessarily in that soul tie place. And so how do I get there and stay there?
Yeah.
And then men in nature, being out in nature, getting out there and discovering the reality that you are easy to kill.
Yeah.
You're pretty easy to kill. What are you going to do? Most men just
get out there with the bears and the cougars and the lions.
The mosquitoes.
And the mosquitoes.
The mosquitoes are probably the top killer.
Oh, yeah.
Probably the top killer in the world.
Yeah.
It's just a very vulnerable experience to go out in nature and face that.
Joe got killed by a lion. You got killed by a mosquito. What do you say at your funeral? Joe fought the law and the law won.
Yeah, that's quite a bite.
No, it's true though.
Yeah, and then men. I think I got them all. And then men in provision.
Yeah,
men in provision is probably the nagging loop of a man's life as a provider.
Yeah,
as somebody who's trying to figure out the money game, a man who's trying to figure out the skills game. A man and machine is the other one. Man and machine.
I know why you put that one in there.
Yeah. Well, there's all that. There's all the racing and that sort of thing. But there's also like some guys just never learn to change a light bulb.
Yeah.
They'll call the electrician. No, honey, light bulb's out. Call electrician. I don't want to deal with it. You got to press into.
You got to man up.
You're a failure. You're this machine, this chainsaw, this could hurt you. You better figure this thing out. There's just all these places in our lives that I really need other men to teach me, to lead me, to show me by example. I need to hear about their lives. I need to be encouraged. So that's
who was that in your life? Who were they in your life?
Whole troop. Yeah, it's been a whole troop of men. You and I have talked about the impact that Bill's had on us.
Yeah, both of us.
Probably the bar setter in our lives.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know there was a man like that.
A great father, noble man.
Yeah, great husband, great character, man of God. We're like, okay, how am I doing today? Well, compared to Jesus or Bill?
Yeah, exactly.
I think for the first 8 years I was saved, I would pray and God would answer in Bill's voice. It was so ridiculous. But that's how much he's affected me and the standard.
Me
too. You've affected my life quite a bit.
We're talking about positive effects right now.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that.
As a bonded in battle.
Well, this would be my brotherhood experience, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, because part of brotherhood that's so valuable is the accountability. I use the word contest, but it's more really provoking one another to good deeds and faith. Like we're provoking each other all the time. I never would have written a book if I did not come to Bethel and be in the environment with you and Bill.
Yeah.
That was dragged out of me. I have a master's degree. I know how to write, but I never would have written a book had I not been in this environment, provoked.
Yeah.
And challenged in that standard. John Tillery, another great man in my life.
You worked for him for quite a while.
I did, and he's probably feels like maybe the first fatherly figure that believed in me as deeply as he did. That radically impacted me, and he was just a great man. He was just a great man of God, and so he's another one. And then I have a bunch of brothers in my life. Right now I have 12 guys I've meet with the last couple of years that we've been to Alaska together. We go hunting here and there. We go, we work together in Loving on Purpose. We are just good friends. We've traveled around the world together. All these different guys, every month I get on a call with them. There's 12 guys. Every month we get on a call together, and we just check up on each other. I have yet to get them all 12 at the same time on the call, or all 12 at the same spot. Yeah. But we just have scheduled events we go to. And Stephen Mansfield, I don't know if you know him? He's written several fantastic books. One is the Band of Brothers.
Yeah, I know him.
Yeah, one is...
I know of him.
Man on Fire.
Yeah.
Men on Fire. He's just written a bunch of. He's such a gifted communicator. He says that men tend to isolate over the course of their life. They start out with lots of brothers, and then by the time they get to 40, there might be 5 guys in their life. By the time they get to 50, there might be 2. If they get in their 60s, they'd be lucky to find one guy that would drop everything to come help them. And it's because relationships become rusty. That you just, I got so busy with my family, my kids, my whatever, this, that, and the other thing.
And all your other brothers died off because you keep getting older.
Yeah, but they became rusty because I was just so busy with my work and my family. Yeah. I'm like, has it been 2 years since we talked? How you been, man? You're like, that's not a brotherhood. Yeah. That's actually a lot of isolation. And one of my guys said, isolation prevents you from making the small adjustments.
Okay, single mom at home, 1, 2, 3 boys, hearing this conversation, and she's like, I'm screwed. Got no men around. Dad doesn't come around or never came around. And, the more I listen to you and Danny talk, the more hopeless I feel because I'm not a man and I don't have any men around. What do I do about that? Because, these are the kind of questions that are coming every time I speak on it. It's like, I'm a single mom. You just kind of said, yeah, you're pretty hopeless.
Well, get those boys to fall in love with you, for starters. Just do a good job.
The boys with the mom.
Yeah. Do a good job of connecting your heart to their heart. And then challenge them, get them involved in sports, get them involved in places where they have to test themselves and they have to compete and they have to suffer loss and they have to build their character.
So important.
These are all things that, mom can do a really great job. We hear over and over and over and over these men that raise up in championship levels and they say,
NBA.
I was raised by a single mom.
I like to thank my grandma.
They didn't give up on me. They held the standard. They held my feet to the fire. They didn't let me get away with diddly. And that's probably one of the most important lessons a man can learn is to take responsibility for his own dang life.
Yeah. I haven't remembered this till just now, and it's been many years, but I remember being around, let's see, I can tell you exactly how old I was. I was 13 years old when my mother went through her first divorce. So my father died when I was 3. My mother got married when I was 5, got divorced when I was 13. And I remember she sat me down and she said, "You're the man of the house now." And I was like 13. I'm like, what does the man of the house do, And
give me a beer, woman.
Exactly. And she's like, you're the man of the house. Like, there's no other man in the house. You're the oldest, and you fix things. You watch over your brother and sister. And I remember just going into my bedroom and just thinking about, I mean, isn't that odd? I haven't even remembered that phrase. But there is something about the responsibility of manhood in a fatherless home where even my mom acknowledged, it was like almost like a rite of passage, like 3-minute speech, you know? And I think you're right. You know, we just got back from a senior leadership team meeting where we were talking about some other issues, but, you know, Bill Johnson said, you know, if my kids are called as musicians and I'm not a musician, it's my job to create a culture and expose them to musicians. I may not be able to know the piano, but I can expose them to people who do. And I think that same principle.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't have to be a man to teach your child respect and responsibility.
And to expose them to other men, as you just talked about.
But you do have to get them around other men for them to learn to be men. Because they're not going to learn to be a man from a woman. It's just not going to happen. And I think that would be the advantage of investing in where do you see this young man being able to thrive? Get him there.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe he's going to thrive as a musician. Well, okay, then maybe it's not going to be a man that teaches him how to thrive as a musician, but
or maybe you should be looking for a man to teach your son instead of a woman. I mean, it's just an idea, right?
Yeah, maybe, but I wouldn't force it because it might be a bad guy. You know, he might be like, I didn't really like this guy, but he was a guy, so I did it anyway. I think it has more to do with this guy learns to respect himself, to respect other people, to take responsibility for himself, to provide, to protect, and to be able to connect. I think these are really crucial characteristics of a man. And like I didn't really learn what I've put into practice until I was 21.
Yeah.
All the stuff I learned before that, I'm going to forget all of that, right?
Yeah.
So it's very much like, don't give up hope. It's not, you know, you don't feel tons of pressure to find a man, but please teach that boy how to respect, be responsible, and connect heart to heart.
Yeah, and you know, this may be harsh. I don't mean it harshly, but don't you know? So many moms, including mine, you know, got so, you know, bitter with men, disappointed with men, and I'm like, oh, you pass that on to your son, you pass that on to your daughters. I mean, that's part of the inadequacy of men. Is my mom convincing my dad was an idiot, and she passed her bitterness, she passed her, you know, her disillusion onto her son, and her son, and her sons, and the sons grow up with like, men aren't good, you know, masculinity's bad, and you know, this is the part of the perpetuation of homosexuality. Honestly, is mom didn't like men. Mom was disappointed in men. So I just want to say publicly, like, if you've got something going on with your ex-husband or your boyfriend or whatever, you need to go get that healed up so that you're not passing it on to your daughters and sons, and they become a living reaction to your bitterness, your disappointment, your abandonment. I'm not saying that the mom is wrong. I'm simply saying that mom could create a legacy of disappointment and bitterness towards it, even towards a gender, and your boys might be playing it out.
And this probably just speaks to, in general, as a parent, you just want to work on your own wholeness and peace.
Yeah,
you know, because that's what you'll give away as an inheritance. You will impart that to your children. So you can try to hide your bitterness. You know, you can try to like bite your lip and not talk bad about their father, or if you're a father, you not talk back about the mom. Talk bad about the mom, but it's so much less about what you're trying not to do than it is who you become as a parent. Yeah. That's what your kids benefit most from, is your wholeness, your health, and in doing so, you know, on our Kylo show podcast that we have, we we always start with and end with whole, healthy families are going to save the world. That's the sandwich that we're building on every one of those shows is how do you become a whole, healthy parent, a whole, healthy spouse, whole, healthy friend? How do you do that? And that, I think, is just the essence of getting out of the family destructive cycle we're living in is parents take responsibility for their own health and wholeness and not necessarily just try to fake their way through it and hope their kids do better.
And you got a whole bunch of material around that. You got Loving on Purpose. I know you have. It's a book and also a manual.
Mm-hmm.
And what have you written lately? You have Keep Your Love On.
Mm-hmm.
These are all like you're listening right now and you're like I don't even know where to start. It's a great place to start right here.
Yeah, we're building something called the Kylo community.
Kylo doesn't mean anything to most of my
I'm going to explain it right now if you wouldn't interrupt me.
Well, I'm trying, but you were going to use that. I was going to fix it for you.
It has nothing to do with Star Wars.
Okay, so let's do this.
It has nothing to do with Star Wars. Kylo means Keep Your Love On. That was a book I wrote about 10 years ago. And the Kylo community is something we're starting up that is going to be essentially taking people from, I read the books, and I really liked them, and I have no idea how to apply it.
Yeah, okay.
So we're building a bridge.
Mentorship kind of thing.
Building a bridge from theory to transformation.
Got it.
How do we actually and you're only going to do that in a community with other people. So it's a little bit like learning Portuguese. Like I could teach myself Portuguese, but would I have a bad accent or what? Yeah. Would I be, a mess? Yeah. I could, get Duolingo and maybe, kind of get a little feedback, or I could move to Brazil.
Yeah.
And be in a community where this is required and I get corrected every time I mispronounce or use the wrong word or get the verb conjugation wrong or whatever. I would, I need that feedback so I can grow and learn and actually speak Portuguese.
How do they get in touch with you? We'll also put it in the feed, but how do they get in touch with you? How do they join that group?
Just go to the Loving on Purpose website.
It's at lovingonpurpose.com.
It is, yeah.
That's it.
Yep.
Well, we just so thank you for following us today. I hope that you got a lot out of this. Really go follow Danny. If you watch this show and you're like, man, I'm in trouble with my family. This is the James Dobson of the 22nd century. This man's amazing. He's changed my life. He's changed my family's life. Thank you so much for being on. And go to lovingonpurpose.com and look at all the materials there. So much of this stuff is free. Lots of that things you can just, if you don't have money, just get on and listen to his teaching, but you will actually be benefited. God bless you. Thank you so much for being on, Danny.
Great to be with you.